I'm Jan Visser, and I'm meeting with George Miley and Pedro Russo at Leiden University in the Netherlands. Leiden University obviously has a great history in astronomy. I remember names of De Sitter, Cooper, Oort, Van der Hulst, and George Miley.
Do not put my name together with those giants of astronomy.
They were indeed giants, I agree. So it's a pleasure to meet you here. You have both, together with another co-author, worked on a chapter on the UNAWI project, Universal Awareness. And I'd like to converse with you on a couple of things.
Thank you for talking with us, Jan.
Yeah. First of all, as you are an astronomer, what motivated you to choose that particular field?
Well, it's quite a long story. Mm-hmm. My father, when I was 8, read a H.G. Wells story, The War of the Worlds. It was about an attack on the Earth by Martians, and it was a great story, and I got very excited by it. I wrote to Herman Brook, who was then director of Dunsink Observatory in Dublin. I come from Ireland, come from Dublin. Mm-hmm. And he invited me, an 8-year-old boy, out to look at Dunsink Observatory. And this made a big impression on me. And when I did physics at university, I had to decide what to do afterwards. And it was at a very exciting time for radio astronomy, mm-hmm. cosmology. They for the first time we were seeing quasars at huge distances that people before had not thought possible. And so I went to Jodrell Bank in the United Kingdom, and I did a PhD there.
What time was that? What year?
In the 60s.
The 60s, okay.
Yeah, the 1960s, not the 1860s.
Yeah, no, 1960s, right. But there was a time before that when the universe was much more limited, and we got to know it later on.
But yeah, actually, when I was at college and doing physics, there was a program on the BBC third program on the radio mm-hmm. about cosmology. And I recorded it at the time, and it really, playing it back now, this was 1959, and we knew quite a lot about the universe. But of course, the last half century has been, the increase in our knowledge has been enormous. And above all else, astronomy is about wonder and about inspiration. Mm-hmm. I mean, although we're professional astronomers, it's very difficult for us to conceive of the size of the universe. People think, oh, you're an astronomer. But every time I think about it and I see little dots on in pictures, and I think the light from those little dots have travelled through through space for 12,000 million years, and we are seeing the universe as it was 12,000 million years ago. It boggles the mind.
Yeah, obviously. Pedro, you are the international coordinator of the Universal Awareness Project.
Yes.
You're also an astronomer.
By training, yes.
And you decided to specialize in science communication.
Exactly.
What motivated you to move through all those various steps?
Well, like George, my interest in astronomy really started when I was very young. I grew up in a very rural community. I had access to the night sky. There was a lot of light pollution, and I remember very well one night that I saw a shooting star, a meteor, and I was with my grandparents, and they could not really answer my question, what was that thing that I saw? So they guided me through a library. I found some books about astronomy, and from that moment on I was completely hooked into the whole thing, and most of my early education in science and astronomy really came from the public library in my community. Mm-hmm. And then I studied astronomy. I started doing some research with the planets, especially from the solar system. But one thing that I really missed was this kind of contact with society, and it was almost a missing link. We were producing all this amazing knowledge that we haven't. We produce in a university like Leiden for centuries now, producing this amazing knowledge, and I think for me it was not complete until we bring it back to society, either in the form of knowledge or understanding, but also in the form of appropriation of knowledge. And I think at that point I realized that science communication could be something that I could really focus on and really dedicate my time. And luckily then I was invited by George to come and work in this wonderful project at the Universe Awareness, and really trying to bring this knowledge that we produce as astronomers to very young children, especially from disadvantaged backgrounds. And I couldn't imagine a better project to work on.
George, I very well remember first meeting that we had about 12 years ago in 2005.
It's as long as that.
That's long ago.
Time goes by very quickly.
Right,
Yeah.
but and you were then thinking about creating a project like you now. It didn't yet exist, but you had ideas about it. And you mentioned specifically, in addition to your interest in astronomy, global development and child development. And you were particularly interested in underprivileged children. What brought you to think about those particular issues?
Well, like Pedro, I'd been doing astronomy all my life, astronomical research, and there was something missing. And as I got older, I felt that I could spend the time now on doing something that could bring the unique aspects of astronomy to benefit society. And my own children, I remember going to their classes at school and telling the class about astronomy, showing some of the beautiful pictures that Hubble was producing, and they were so excited by it. And so this was a target group that science communicators had neglected relatively, very young children. But when they're young, they're forming their value systems, and so it was really, I thought there was something that we could do to help form the children, because most religions want to get hold of children when they're very, very young, and that's for a reason, to tell them about their religion right from the earliest age. But to me, telling children that they are in such a huge universe and such a beautiful universe in itself would be could help to help further a spirit of tolerance and of world citizenship from a very early age. Mm-hmm. And how do you see that connection actually between awareness of the universe and concepts like tolerance and? Well, I told you earlier about the fact that the universe is so big, so huge, and Carl Sagan, the very famous and gifted science communicator, he said that if you saw the Earth as a pale blue speck of light from a distance, then it would also help put the whole fanaticism and extreme nationalism. It's very difficult to continue to support this sort of thing if you saw the small Earth, which we are all part of, and which we all really must protect. And so by getting over to children the perspective of the universe, the idea is that it does help put everything in perspective. Mm-hmm. And so that things that they might have got very extreme emotions about, maybe they would see that in proportion.
I think adding a bit to that, I think one I think astronomy as a science, and really like George was saying, puts our own worldview in a very different perspective, right? We realize that we live in just a planet out of the thousands of planets that now we know. And I think something that is being reported even by astronauts, when we look at the planet Earth from space, for that space exploration has been very important. We look at the planet where we don't see any borders. We just see a very complex system, but we don't see any borders that usually actually kids see in their terrestrial globes that they have in the classrooms. And I think for us, the message of the Earth as it is something that is borderless. And I think we can really cultivate this idea of global citizenship, which we know that's very important. And organizations like UNESCO have been putting at the central place of education, the education for global citizenship. And I think we astronomers can really contribute to that and really provide that sense of global citizenship.
And also in the last 20, 30 years, we've learned that planets, that practically every star, at least half of all stars, have solar systems of their own, have planets going around them. And if you realize how many stars there are in our galaxies and how many galaxies there are in the universe, there are probably about 10 to the power of 22 planets in the universe. And that's 10 million planets in the universe. And so again, that puts things in perspective, but it really is 20, 30 years ago, we didn't know any planets outside our own solar system.
Exactly. Yeah, so in addition to becoming aware of the universe, you become aware of yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely.
See yourself in that perspective.
Exactly.
That's the important thing. In the project, you make use of lots of things, tools, and technology in the sense of information communication technology as well. Pedro, you're perhaps the person who should say something about it.
Yeah, of course. I mean, we've been talking a lot about these messages, these concepts, or these ideas that we have been working with. But of course, this is a program that tries to engage young children, their educators, and their families. And it's at the same time is a global program. So we are active in more than 60 countries. And this is a bottom-up project. So the countries, they identify themselves with the vision and the mission of our project. They join, and we share expertise, we share best practices, and we as the glue that brings this community together, identify opportunities, identify resources, and tries to improve them if necessary, and distribute them through the large network. Luckily, also in the last decades, we have access to tools like the internet that enable us to have a wide distribution of our resources. But we also found that we need to find the right balance between the digital products and the physical products. That's why I've been developing material like the Earth Ball or Universe in a Box, this educational kit with very simple, low-cost material, because we found that a lot of these teachers missed some physical material where they could use this material to construct models that are important to understand these concepts of perspective. So I've been trying to find the balance between the production of digital resources and also physical resources.
You learn not only with the brain, but also with your hands.
Exactly, absolutely. And one thing for us is important is that these communities, and we work a lot with developing countries, can also sometimes build these own resources in a very easy way. So all our resources are open source, open educational resources, so people can copy, adapt, readapt, build their own models, and just basically try to inspire as many teachers and educators and parents to bring astronomy to the young ones.
One thing which you asked me earlier, and which I don't think I elaborated on, is that universe awareness is for all children, but clearly the resources needed to go out to all children, we don't have enough resources. So where possible, we concentrate it where we feel the most need is, and that's often on underprivileged communities and the poorer communities, although they may be poor financially, very often they're in a very rich environment as far as the universe is concerned. They can, if I look up at the sky in Leiden, I can't hardly see a star. But if you're in Namibia and you look up at the sky,
Yeah.
you see a beautiful collection of the Milky Way and a beautiful collection of stars. So, but we do feel that we want this concept to preferentially come to the communities where there's the most need.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, with the digital resources, we can go anywhere and anywhere, can access to our information. Everything is very open. But if we have to decide if we send an educational kit to a rich school in Europe or a school in a developing country to need much more, of course, we'll decide for the school in the developing country.
And as Pedro says, it's a bottom-up project. So we feel that people who are actually doing the work have the most knowledge of the countries involved, and they must have ownership of the project in their country.
And we've been learning a lot from all this community. Mm-hmm. This is really an experience for everyone.
There are many projects, of course, that have as a goal global development, but universal awareness somehow stands out, I think. Do you agree?
Well, look, I'm biased clearly, so I would prefer not to answer that. But I do feel that the ideology that actually is the basis of universal awareness is the fact that astronomy, the universe, has connections to fundamental science. It has connections to cutting-edge technology, and it also has connections to the deepest culture. I mean, we're super historians. We look at the universe, we go way back beyond what normal historians do. So these three pillars of the universe and astronomy, of fundamental science, technology, and culture, are pillars of development. And so we do feel that through these links, these three basic links, astronomy and the universe, space, can play a very special role in furthering development.
So it's really a transdisciplinary project.
It's a transdisciplinary project, certainly. And
maybe I'll add, and George was being a bit humble on this, but recently we've also been selected by the Finnish government as one of the most innovative projects in education. And I think it comes from that perspective that it's very rare that you have a science that it's very fundamental. It's very about fundamental questions that they don't seem to have a direct impact in our life, that is astronomy, and really putting an effort to use this as a tool for development, tool for education, and really trying to translate that knowledge that we have and have an impact in children, communities, and of course society that otherwise will not have an impact by astronomy.
And I do think that universal awareness, the fact that it has both educational goals to acquaint children with science and technology, and social goals to further a sense of world citizenship, I think that is a fairly unique aspect of the program. And I do think also that the last years, the need for furthering a sense of world citizenship has increased quite a lot by all the developments that have happened, some of them rather depressing. So anything we can do to get to reach children at a very early age when their value systems are forming, I do think is worthwhile.
It's a project in which children and top scientists interact, in fact. So there's an impact on the children. There's also an impact on the scientists.
We've seen more and more that the role of society in science, it's increasing also from the policymakers' perspective. There's a need to involve more society, the non-experts with science. I think there's also a push in terms of the policies that we see. We also, in our own case that we work at Leiden Observatory, we have seen that the different, especially the last visiting committee that review our observatory really praise the type of activities that we do here because they see that it's a priority to engage with society at large. And I can give an interesting story that we have is that we had a visit like for a colloquium of a Nobel Prize in Physics, Brian Schmidt, and he came here and we decided to have a small conversation with Brian and a few kids from the American school because they didn't have to speak English. And these kids are 10, 11-year-olds. And at the end, he had like an amazing hour spending time with these kids. And at the end, he said, the questions that I got from this kid were much more demanding than the questions that I got in the scientific colloquia. And I think you're saying, and it actually made me think about some of creative solutions that I might have for the scientific problems that I have. So also enabling the contact of scientists with kids can really push you to some boundaries of your own research and think outside the box. And that was very interesting. I think we scientists, especially our colleagues, should do that more often, should go more frequently, maybe even once or twice a year to a primary school and expose themselves to the tricky questions from these kids and might help them with their own research.
Well, the other point is that astronomical facilities are becoming more and more expensive, and we're asking society to fund them. So we have to give back something to society. Absolutely. And I do think this is something that a program like Universe Awareness, if it actually spreads wider, it can more than pay for itself. Mm-hmm. And I do think it would be a very, very good influence on society all around the world.
Thank you so much for a very interesting and pleasant conversation.
Thank you.
Well, thanks for talking with us.
Thanks for the opportunity.
And also for your support over the years.
Of course, that's natural.